Hello and welcome. Thank you for checking in today. I'm Stefan Corsell, an acupuncturist and Asian medicine practitioner with the Chanda Center for Health. Given the developments of the last several weeks, I'm wanting to provide, along with the rest of the team, some resources and tools to help us all manage as best as possible. Obviously, with much of what we're dealing with now, both with the concerns about the virus and how it's affected our day-to-day lives and the outcomes to still be determined. We can't really have much influence or control over that at this point, but we can, our response both as individuals and as a community, and that's what I want to really kind of focus on. What can we do to help us have the ideal response to a difficult situation? That being said, I think it's normal for all of us and very much expected to have days that it's a little bit easier and days that are a little bit harder to manage all that's going on right now. And I think it's important to make room for those feelings, but not to get stuck with them. Having worked with a lot of chronically ill, sometimes terminal patients, I could always see the people that would allow themselves at the times to really feel bad about the situation, sit with those emotions and have those feelings and process them, were able to move on, versus people who would just try and push a lot of that down, and over time that would come out in an aggravated stress response that would affect them in a lot of different ways, negatively, of course. I think it's also important at a time like this to have some routines to keep us busy. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, but also to leave some time and not be over busy, not to really just sit with the situation and allow ourselves some times to really be able to be coming from a place of responding and not reacting. And that's where some of the meditation and mindfulness practices can come in and be very helpful. And Chanda Center has been providing some of those resources through their different social media sites, and I would encourage you to be checking into all those resources. A lot of the stuff that has already been presented about mindfulness and movement, breathing, are all things that are certainly going to be helpful in supporting some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. Really feel that this is a time for us as individuals and communities to minimize our risk and gives ourselves, in an attempt to give ourselves the best outcomes. No matter what eventually happens, if we're incorporating some of these strategies, we're going to be in the best position to deal with whatever is going to come. So we try and do our best, not knowing the outcome, but doing the best is going to put us in the best position to deal with what will be coming along the way. Of course, I'll be talking a little bit more too about the importance of connecting with others. And so more and more in different webinars I've been watching and listening to, the idea of physical distancing versus social distancing. So, one of the advantages of the time that we live in and technology we have is there's a lot of opportunities for us to be able to connect and communicate when we can't do that face to face. And there is a lot of evidence that supports that benefit for our immune system function, overall health and well-being. Just want to reinforce, as we're all talking about different things, if you are having difficulty with getting access to what you're needing just for basic needs or for implementing some of the things that we're all talking about, I certainly would be encouraging you to reach out to me, to reach out to the rest of the Chanda team and care coordinators, so that we can try and get those resources available to you. So, how do we best support ourselves during this time? And so one of the best things we can do for ourselves is to help support a good, healthy, functioning immune system. So the proper functioning immune system, to address both people that tend to have an under-responding immune system, so a compromised immune system, or someone that is more on the autoimmune spectrum with high levels of inflammation and a hyper reflexive immune response. And that's particularly important because the inflammatory response is a big component of the more severe symptoms that's associated with the complications of the virus that people are currently dealing with, the COVID. So anything we can do to help minimize inflammation is going to help us in general, but in particular is going to help our immune system respond in a more appropriate way without damaging the system as a whole. And then lastly, if and when we do get ill, whether it's with this virus or in general, what can we do to minimize the impact? So both the duration and intensity if we do get ill. As I discuss these strategies, there's a need to make it clear that there is understandably a lack of specific research and information related to COVID. The main focus is on supporting good health, proper immune system function. So there are no specific claims to prevent or treat. Again, we're trying to get our system in the best possible place to respond appropriately if and when it's dealing with this virus or any other virus. Today, I plan to spend the bulk of my time discussing nutritional approaches. I will start with a review of strategies known to support the goals of the immune system in managing inflammation and reducing severity of disease. Next week, I will be incorporating other self-care tools, and the main focus will be on self-acupressure. I will talk specifically about adaptations for people that have limited mobility and for those people that do not have enough functional movement to really be able to stimulate the points effectively. I think it's always good to watch with a companion, family member, caregiver. When I've taught acupressure classes in the past, I've always encouraged people to come with a partner, both to practice and therefore be able to provide it to each other. So there's a variety of strategies. And again, if it's something that you're interested in and finding it's hard to do, be happy to try problem solve some ideas of how you might be able to manage that. So before I get specifically into the nutritional component of things, I want to talk about some of the information that's come out or just kind of really been put into condensed form as far as all the lifestyle choices that we can make that help support our good immune function. So of course, one of the top things on the list is nutrition. And we're going to be talking a lot more about that, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that now. So I will touch on some of the other things first. So one, of course, is stress management. Obviously, it's very high stress time. It's to be expected that we're all going to have a certain level of stress. But again, how do we react and try and work with that stress rather than we want to be able to respond and not react. And so there are a variety of stress management tools, obviously, mindfulness practices, meditation, creative outlets, whether it's participating ourselves or enjoying art, music. Humor has been shown very specifically to be a great stress management tool and actually can change cortisol levels and decrease stress on our immune system. And so having a good laugh, watching something entertaining, interacting with friends online, etc., can be really helpful with that. Breathing exercises, and so Chanda Center has already posted several videos about different breathing techniques to help in this respect, and so I would encourage you to check those out at your leisure. Sleep is plays a very important role in good immune function and can be a driver for both immune weakness and autoimmune disorders. So of course we know the usual recommended is 7 to 9 hours. Some things that help promote good sleep is sleeping in a cool, dark room, obviously to your comfort with temperature. It's good to take, they used to say more like a minute, but more and more the research and recommendations are up to 90 minutes before really trying to decrease electronic stimulation, TV, computers, phones, etc. The blue light that's emanated can be really disruptive for sleep patterns overall. there are increasing options to use blue light filters, but still better to just try and switch gears a little bit before bed. It's always good to have a ritual. Sleep is something that is very susceptible to patterns and routines. So if we get in bad sleep patterns and routines, those are very easily reinforced. But if we can develop some good healthy sleep routines, some people like to take a warm bath or shower a little bit before bed, reading, writing, listening to quiet music, low-level activities like that, engaged with family in a quiet way can all be good ways to help manage that. Of course, this is a time in particular, always, but particularly now, to really limit respiratory distressors. So really trying to limit inhaling anything, tobacco, marijuana, whether it be smoke or vaping. So it can be really hard to stop something like that at a time like this, stressful. So obviously, trying to use some tool strategies if needed, like nicotine replacement, edibles, things along those lines, so that we're not adding additional stress onto the respiratory system. And this would also include inhalants. Like, it's not a good time, although for some of us, it might seem like a good time to get some things done around the home, but it's not a good time to be doing like a lot of painting or having other people doing it, being around the fumes from new construction, painting, other kind of chemicals, etc. So just trying to limit our exposures is always good, but particularly at this time, a good thing to be doing. We already spoke about the connectivity. And lastly is physical activity and movement. And so this can really vary for those of us who are able to get up and move around. Obviously, there's a lot of options, but whether it's just doing some exercises at home, stretching, whatever movements you can, if needed, caretakers helping move you through range of motion. But keeping the body moving is a great way to help support our good immune system, and also a good way to help reduce and manage inflammation. Making sure we stay well hydrated, drinking plenty of fluids, always a good strategy in general. Again, as I mentioned with smoking, obviously it can be very easy to use alcohol as one of our tools to help manage our stress. And not a good time if we can try to minimize that for a variety of reasons, as it definitely compromises our nutritional status, increases inflammation, and depresses the immune system because of those two factors. So we all have to work with what we have, but certainly would be a great time to really try to be managing the level of our alcohol consumption. And so some of those are some of the general tools. As I said before, some of these resources have already been covered in other videos that are available through the Chanda Center. And I'll be continuing to doing weekly talks over the month of April with a combination of different lifestyle suggestions, as well as the continuing dietary ideas that could be helpful for a variety of concerns. Today, it's mostly going to be focused on immune system function, also going to touch on some nutritional choices around the stress management piece as well. So I'm going to go over some of the specific nutrients and foods that can be most helpful for supporting the immune system again, and some of the specific functions they have, those nutrients and the foods that are most well consumed. In general, the diet that is most helpful for supporting the immune system is a diet that's very high in plant intake. And so that would, of course, include vegetable and fruits, but also things like legumes, nuts, and seeds. And so we're going to be touching on a lot of those foods specifically, and giving you some ideas of what's important. But in general, by eating those types of foods, and especially with the produce and veggies, trying to incorporate a variety of different colors, and foods, so variety is key, you will be getting the nutrients that you'll be needing to help support that good immune function, reducing inflammation, and reducing the severity and frequency of any illnesses that we do, in fact, encounter. So one of the key strategies is an anti-inflammatory diet, which goes along with the plant-based diet that I just talked about. And I have done a talk in the past about anti-inflammatory diet. So after this talk is posted, I will be adding some links in the comments, and I will include some links to the talks that I've done previously that I think are most relevant. So there is a prior talk on Facebook where I talk specifically about anti-inflammatory diet and how it could be helpful for our nervous system. But of course, a lot of those same strategies are helpful for supporting our immune system. And lastly, depending on the availability and our access, as far as looking at when we can get fresh, fresh is always ideal. The next best would be frozen foods. There's more and more evidence that fresh frozen foods are going to be pretty close to the nutritional benefit as fresh food. And so that would be an easier, sometimes more cost-effective way to go that would allow you to get some more of that into your diet. So I'm going to start with some of the specific vitamins. Vitamin A or beta carotene is a very strong anti-inflammatory, as a lot of these nutrients are. And in particular, it is helpful for maintaining the mucus lining of both the respiratory and digestive tract, which partially helps create a barrier that makes it harder for bacteria, viruses, and other pathogens to get into the system in the first place. Some of the foods that are ideal for getting vitamin A would be our squashes, particularly winter or butternut squash, sweet potatoes, dark leafy greens, carrots, some of our dairy butter and eggs, and broccoli. So those would be some really good A or beta carotene foods. Next is vitamin C, another powerful anti-inflammatory. There is more news coming out of Asia and Europe, and even in New York City, where they're looking at, there's been some benefit for people when they're severely ill with COVID, and in the cytokine storm, that high dosing intravenous of vitamin C has been able to help some people recover. Of course, this is still anecdotal, but there is ongoing research, application, looking at this as a potential strategy. For our sake, just knowing that it is such a powerful anti-inflammatory, again, really important for maintaining the integrity of that mucus lining, which creates a nice barrier. Most of us know citrus has a good vitamin C. Actually, one of the best is red bell peppers. We have some fruits like kiwi and strawberry that are also helpful. Tomatoes, leafy greens actually have a good amount of vitamin C as well. And some of our tropical fruits like papaya and mango would also have good levels of vitamin C in. And now I'm going to move on to vitamin D. Vitamin D can be very helpful for helping support the development and maintenance of our T cells, which is one of our major infection-fighting cells in the immune system. Vitamin D has been shown specifically reduce the risk of both viral and respiratory diseases, both of which would be appropriate in this situation. Most people tend to be vitamin D deficient, don't get out in the sun enough. Being more in a northern latitude, even if you do get enough sun, this time of year, it's hard to generate enough vitamin D from that. So it is good to try to increase some into your diet. It also can be a helpful tool for immune response proactively. So using it on the front end, not to treat disease, but to try to prevent disease. Some of our dietary sources, of course, would be fish. I tend to try to recommend some of the fish that are high in these nutrients, but are not as over-farmed or as toxic with heavy metals and stuff. So some of the better options for you with that would be halibut, carp, mackerel fish. Mushrooms actually can be a very good source of vitamin D. Eggs, and you can sometimes also get eggs that are basically supplemented with additional vitamin D. Since it is pretty common to be low on vitamin D, it is considered pretty safe to take at low dosage. There's a high benefit and low risk with taking it. If you've never taken it before, it would always be good to talk to one of your healthcare practitioners, whether it be your doctor or one of your providers here at the Chanda Center. So it's safe to supplement up to about 5,000 IU, which will definitely give you a benefit for some immune system support. And it's best to take in with some fatty foods, since vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. And there is evidence that incorporating it with vitamin K helps with the absorption of both vitamin D and vitamin K. And vitamin K doesn't have a specific role, high-level role in immune function, but certainly helps support good blood health. All right, and then our next vitamin would be vitamin E. Another good anti-inflammatory, helping manage that inflammatory response. And just to reinforce, I've talked about this in the past, but inflammation is part of the immune system response and a helpful and appropriate response, but it can get overly responsive, and that can cause a lot of damage. And that tends to happen with more consistency in people that already have high inflammatory states. So the more we can manage that inflammation, the less likely our system is to respond in an overreactive way. So vitamin E is found in a lot of seeds and nuts, specifically sunflower seeds can be really helpful. Almonds, spinach and avocado, butternut squash, olive oil, mangoes, and sweet potato. Next, I'm going to move on to some of the minerals that can also be helpful for supporting our immune system function. The first one is going to be selenium. Selenium is a very powerful antioxidant in the system. And one of the effects of that is it helps to decrease inflammation. And it has been shown specifically to help regulate that cytokine response, which is a high inflammation response, which ends up causing organ damage, which often is what we see with people, again, experiencing more severe responses to the virus. Selenium helps produce glutathione, which is another powerful antioxidant in the system, and it helps decrease the inflammation, again, that overactive response. Some of the foods that are highest in selenium would be Brazil nuts, sunflower seeds, brown rice, eggs, poultry, liver, fish, mushrooms, again, really good option for that. Next, I'm going to move on to zinc. Zinc is very helpful in the development and function of our immune cells, and it helps actually increase our white cell counts, which can help with an appropriate immune system response. And some of the foods that we'll find high in zinc would include, again, a lot of the seeds and nuts, pumpkin and hemp seeds being two of the best for this. We also have chickpeas, lentils, cashews and almonds, cocoa powder, and dairy and poultry again. And the last mineral that I wanted to talk today about would be copper. So zinc and copper also have a bonding relationship, like I talked about with D and K. So I'm going to be talking a little bit in a little while about some potential supplementation for people. Zinc is one thing that a lot of people know about and are using, and that's not a bad thing. We do want to talk about dosing in a little while, and one of the side effects, so to speak, or unwanted effects, if we overconsume zinc as a supplement, it can mess with our copper metabolism and our copper levels. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but we really want to try to, for the most part, limit our intake to zinc to 30 milligrams a day. So for copper, there's still not a clear pathway of the specific benefit for immune system function. However, there is a clear amount of research that shows that people with copper deficiency have immune system deficiencies. And so we want to make sure to keep up those copper levels as well. And for copper, we have at the top of the list, actually, is dark chocolate, always an easy one to include for most people. Sunflower seeds, cashews, all seeds and nuts, but those two in particular are highest. Chickpeas again, and other legumes. Lentils would be another good option for you. Raisins, avocados yet again, and some asparagus as another alternative. So these are some of the main nutrients that help support a good immune system response. There are some secondary nutrients that I also wanted to touch upon, both for their benefits in helping support those nutrients with the immune system and also in their ability to help with our stress management. So at the top of that list would be our B vitamins. So again, kind of like I mentioned with copper, it doesn't have a direct effect, but deficiency in our B vitamins result in an immune deficiency. B vitamins drive much of the cellular activity throughout the body. They play a huge role in managing inflammation in the body. And during times of high stress, we tend to consume more B vitamins, and we tend to be more stress resilient if we boost those B levels up. So for some of our B vitamins, I mean, the best thing is to be getting in a variety of our B vitamins, the whole complement. So that's another talk that I've done in the past. And so if you want to get some more information about the B vitamins, you can access that video on Facebook Live as well. But the 3 B vitamins that I most consistently see being mentioned for immune system support would be B1, thiamine, B6, and folic acid. And so for B1 or thiamine, which also can play a really important role in nervous system function and peripheral nerve functions, coincidentally. Nutritional yeast, to be very clear, nutritional yeast is a little different than brewer's yeast. Nutritional yeast is very high in B vitamins and can be used as a supplement. It's used often by people that are vegetarian, that are having a hard time getting in or just wanting to supplement that. And you can use that basically as a condiment, sprinkle it on foods or add it to things like smoothies to kind of bump up the B vitamins. Seaweed, sea vegetables, a good source for B1. Our seeds and nuts again, beans and legumes, and a bunch of our veggies, Brussels sprouts, spinach, eggplant, potatoes, some dairy products, and most of our organ meats also would have high levels of B1. Next is B6, which also really helpful for nervous system function in general, the stress management piece, and an effect on helping support good immune system function. Some of our best sources of B6 per serving would be some of our animal proteins, turkey breast and grass-fed beef being the 2 top, but we can also get them through nuts like pistachios in particular, beans, pinto beans in particular, avocados, chicken breast, and some of our seeds, sunflower seeds, sesame seeds in particular. And lastly, I have folic acid, folate. Our beans and leafy greens can be great options for those. We also have some of our legumes again, our leafy greens, avocados, broccoli, also high in folic acid. Talked about a couple of the fat-soluble vitamins A and D, fats in general, omegas in particular can be really helpful, and again, in helping manage that inflammatory response. We can get those through things like avocados, olives, seeds, and nuts, fish, of course, as well. And fats is another nutritional discussion that I've done and is on Facebook Live. So if you wanted to look a little bit more into some of the ins and outs of that, that would be a good resource for you. We also want to keep up our iron levels for good, healthy blood. Iron is primarily involved with red blood cell production, but also for the health of the blood system overall. We can get plenty of iron through animal proteins, our legumes, nuts, some produce options as well, including some of the leafy greens and broccoli. I would also encourage people to be trying to get in some probiotic fermented foods. There's a lot of evidence specifically about how a healthy gut biome helps improve the absorption of the nutrients they want to get into our system, helps improve our overall immune system function. In fact, much of our immune system cells come out of the digestive process directly, and so the incubator of the immune system in many ways is actually in the gut. And so having a good healthy gut biome, which we can do by eating a lot of the plant-based foods that we've already been talking about in a way to kind of help boost those up. Obviously you can take supplements, but you can also just incorporate some of these good healthy foods into your diet. So of course yogurt, preferably low sugar, sauerkrauts, kefir, other fermented dairy products, all can kind of give us a good boost in this direction. So that pretty much covers what I wanted to talk to specifically about specific nutrients and foods. Also was going to touch on some of the information that's coming out about some herbs and supplements, some of it really looking, again, since there's not a lot of evidence at this point specifically about the COVID virus, but about antivirals and herbs and supplements that have been shown to have an antiviral effect in general. So again, some of these things are things that there is evidence that would suggest that they would be helpful for managing our immune system function, which would ideally give us a better shot of managing any encounters with this virus in a much better way. So some of the things I wanted to touch upon would be, it's actually been broken down. Dr. Weil, the University of Arizona, has been putting out some really good information, very well research-based. So this is a synopsis of some of this stuff. I will be adding more of it in the coming weeks, and they're continuing to update that. So that is another link that I will include in the comment section for those of you that are interested to see what might be appropriate for you. Obviously, I don't like to say obviously, not obviously. I always like to reinforce to people that if you were to consider doing anything other than dietary, any herbs or supplements, if they're not things that you've done before, that especially, in general, it would always be good to talk to one of your practitioners. But in particular, if you haven't done anything before, it would be good to talk with a healthcare provider, one of your practitioners, just to make sure there's no interactions, that anything specific to your situation would be counterindicated. So some of the things that we've seen some benefit for in general for viruses, So three things that have been specifically identified as helping both prevent the virus from being able to get its initial entry, as well as being able to replicate. And so astragalus root, which is a root, a root and a herb that's been used specifically in Asian medicine for centuries, specifically for immune system support. And with a really good track record, it's been researched specifically with oncology patients with really good results as far as measurable benefits on blood counts and supporting the immune system function. Quercetin, which is a naturally occurring enzyme in many foods, and so you can actually consume those in onions and apples. Quercetin is a powerful anti-inflammatory and has been shown specifically, again, to prevent viral entry and the replication of the virus within the body. So you can get that through apples and onions. You can also obviously take that as a supplement. One of the additional benefits of quercetin that they're just discovering is it actually helps with the absorption of zinc. So if you were wanting to boost up your zinc levels by eating some of those zinc foods or getting a little in supplementally, and then if you were adding some extra apples, onions to your diet, or a little bit of a quercetin supplement, it's going to help you with your zinc levels as well. And the last thing, which we've already discussed, would be D3, with its role in both helping prevent the viral entry and the replication of the virus. Some of the nutrients that have been specifically seen as preventing the cytokine storm, that big inflammatory response, which is where people really get into trouble and where we see more mortality, is with that cytokine storm. So some of the things that we've talked about already would be the plant flavonoids. So basically all those different fruits and veggies that we talked about supporting the immune system. Vitamin C in particular is really powerful for that, and that's why it's being used in the ER, in the hospitals, in situations where they don't really have other strategies. And again, it's too early to say with certainty, but we know it's a powerful anti-inflammatory, and there is anecdotal evidence that it has been beneficial for some people in helping them pull them back from that cytokine storm. One thing I discovered through one of Dr. Weil's online talks was the role of melatonin. Melatonin can be a very powerful anti-inflammatory, and he actually discussed taking that at higher dosages than most people take for sleep. Again, I wouldn't suggest doing that on your own, but certainly if you've used melatonin for sleep, it can certainly have an additional benefit of helping with decreasing that inflammation. The quercetin is, again, also very helpful in managing inflammation. Garlic has been shown to be a very helpful, powerful anti-inflammatory. Green tea, there's a specific component in that, EGCG, but teas in general and green tea in particular can be really helpful for managing inflammation. And lastly, mushrooms, also good anti-inflammatory, most mushrooms across the board. One thing of particular concern is that it's the whole mushroom. So ideally eating it, if you are taking mushroom supplements, you want to make sure it's the whole supplement. There are some concerns about isolated components of mushrooms. While having many benefits, can actually increase the inflammatory process that we really don't want to be doing. Some other dietary herbs that can be really helpful, that can also be boosted up a little bit safely with supplements. Ginger has been shown to have antiviral properties as well as anti-inflammatory properties. Turmeric has been shown and is known as a powerful anti-inflammatory, but also increased evidence of its ability to, again, help prevent the virus from being able to enter the body, that more accurately, the cells of the body, and then also helping manage that inflammatory storm. The green tea, we already mentioned olive leaf. So I've mentioned olive oil and those types of fats in general as being really good. There is a particular component in the olives allopurin, that is the thing that's considered to be most beneficial. It can be hard to consume enough olive oil to get the full benefit without over-consuming olive oil, which as healthy as it is, we still don't want to be over-consuming a fat like that. So olive leaf extract taking has been shown to, again, have a very good anti-inflammatory response. It's very high on the antioxidant scoring, and can specifically manage the immune system and inflammatory response. Beetroot juice is another thing that has been shown to be helpful for helping with an appropriate immune system response, especially during times of stress. Beta-glucans, and those would be beta-glucans specifically grown on yeast versus the mushrooms. That's where you can get into some issues, have been shown to be helpful for maintaining a good immune system response, and spirulina as well. There are some essential oils that can be taken either internally or a lot of times can be recommended to inhale. So oregano and thyme can be two ones that have been specifically shown to have a higher level of antiviral action. So you can do, I oftentimes will do at home, there's some sickness going around, I'll get a big pot on the stove, get it pretty warm, add some oregano oil to it, and just let it kind of perfuse to the house. You can also do where you just do a little bowl of hot water, put a couple drops of the oregano oil, put the towel over the head, kind of breathe some of that in, can really give you a lot of benefits in that respect. Right. Make sure I haven't missed anything here. So I going to just go over one more thing about some of Dr. Weil's recommendations based on research about the risk reduction considerations for the COVID-19. So to just reinforce again, the idea of good adequate sleep, really important. I'm going to be talking in a minute about some of the stress management tools which could be helpful for sleep and stress management itself. Zinc, and so there was some information out there, some controversy. Zinc has been shown to be able to inhibit viruses, and specifically coronaviruses. Again, we don't have enough information specific to this, but in general, it can prevent the virus from being able to get into the cells where it takes over and starts to replicate itself. And there is evidence that using zinc lozenges up to 30 milligrams a day, so a couple of those over the course of the day, and letting some of those secretions get to the back of the throat can really kind of, again, create a barrier that makes it harder for those viruses to get into the cells and start to replicate and take over. Again, he encourages a lot of the vegetables and fruits on some specific flavonoids. So he was the one that talked about the quercetin, the onions and the apples, and its ability to chelate zinc and kind of help us with the absorption of zinc. And he just goes over, I'm just trying to see if there's anything else here that I forgot. It looks like I kind of covered all that stuff already. The one thing I didn't talk about was elderberry. And so elderberry has a long history of being used to help support immune system function. There are some concerns, although the general consensus is that they're overstated, but that part of elderberry's effects is through the immune, through an inflammatory response, and that it can temporarily increase the inflammatory response. So the recommendation at this point is that if you've used elderberry and would like to continue to use elderberry as a proactive support, that it is certainly safe to do so, but a sign of illness that you would want to, just to be on the side of caution, step away from that and try to incorporate some of the other strategies along the way. But he talked about the melatonin. So some other things to potentially avoid because there are inflammatory parts. So I talked about the elderberry. the isolated extracts of mushrooms, echinacea would be another one, and then vitamin D. So as I mentioned before, using it more proactively, we would not want to be doing additional vitamin D once we were sick, again, because it can slightly kick up the inflammatory response, and we don't want to do that at that particular time. So the things that Dr. Weil recommends is certainly being safe to use during symptoms of a virus infection in general, or for this, if you wanted to use proactively, would include the garlic, the quercetin, astragalus, mushrooms, peppermint, andrographis, which I didn't talk about. So andrographis is a herb that's used a lot in Asian medicine for immune system function, for helping treat illness. Green tea extracts, again, green tea, drinking some green tea, zinc, vitamin A, and vitamin C. So those would be things that that have been shown to be safe, and that there wouldn't be concerns about contributing to any additional symptoms during this type of concern. So last, I just wanted to not neglect and talk a little bit more about stress management and what we might be able to do to, again, mostly through diet, but was also going to talk on some of the other things. So the idea of taking control, like stress, obviously right now stress is pretty high for everything. Stress can be a motivating factor if we can kind of get a handle on it. And so the mindfulness practice, the breathing practices, the movement, are all ways that we can kind of help kind of like our body process, absorb, work through some of the neurochemical responses, and help us get to a place where we can actually use that stress response as to motivate us to get us moving. It can be easy when things are easy, sit back a little bit, and if we can find a way to manage our stress, we can actually use it to help us motivate us and do what we can to help support ourselves and our community in the best way possible. We know, and there's research that shows and supports, that helping others is a great way to help our own stress management and help improve our immune response. So that can look a lot of different ways, whether it's just reaching out and talking to someone. If you're in a position that you can provide something that someone else can't, being able to do that. So just finding ways that you can get away from your own stuff a little bit and be out there helping other people consistently shows that people's affect improves, their immune system response removes, and their stress levels tend to go down. The social aspect, as I already talked about, the sleeping is really important, trying to develop some routines around that. Try moving, as limited as it might seem. It might not seem like exercise to you, but even stretching, moving, what you can move, being stretched or moved, all can be really helpful. And of course, our mindfulness practices, our breathing practices, yoga, tai chi, all of these can be tools. And the nice thing with these is, as I mentioned before, the center has already been putting out some information and resources for that. And it's been great to see the array of stuff that's being offered online, much of it for free or donation-based, that you can tap in and do a yoga class, do a tai chi class, get some more breathing ideas, different breathing activities, etc. Lots of different meditation, mindfulness stuff, certainly available online. And I think some of those have been already included in some of the Chanda Center information, and I can add to that as well after the video is posted. Getting enough daylight is really important. And so for some of us, that might be really hard right now. We might not have access a lot to the outdoors, or pretty limited. But if we can get outdoors, even if it's just on a porch in a backyard somewhere, can be really helpful for our mood, partially through that vitamin D, but just the beneficial effects of that. And in particular, they're finding that the early morning light, so morning light, is particularly helpful for developing a good circadian rhythm, which is relating to sleep-wake cycles, etc. It helps improve mood, and there is some benefit for immune system function as well. Creating a good environment at home, good respiratory health. It's good to try and keep the humidity in our our residents to about 40%. Anywhere between 35 and 45% is considered ideal. So if you're in a position, have a humidifier and can kind of get it up there. And again, sometimes I'll just use a big pot on the stove on a very low setting. Just keep refilling it with water and let that kind of add some humidity as well, oftentimes with some essential oils. So some of the specific nutrients that can be really helpful in managing stress. I already touched on the B vitamins, but certainly trying to get more of those in, both through our animal protein. A lot of our veggies, particularly our leafy greens, can be pretty good. Some of our nuts and seeds and legumes as well. Magnesium, I oftentimes am talking about magnesium with people. It's called the calming mineral. So it can be really good for calming the body, but it can be also good for calming the mind. It can help with more restful, restorative sleep, can help reduce anxiety, kind of just help us feel calm in general without having sedating effect. There are some other supplemental options for that as well. Theanine being another amino acid that has been shown to help decrease anxiety, reduce stress, some potential benefit for immune system function. Our fats, again, can be really helpful. The anti-inflammatory effect. Stress oftentimes can manifest in the body as an increased inflammatory state. The omega-3s can really help modify that. Some pretty safe supplements that I still would not encourage people to take if they haven't taken before without talking to a healthcare provider would be kava and GABA. Both good safety profile and can be really helpful for, again, calming the nervous system without sedating it. And we also have some of the essential oils like lavender and chamomile, which can also have a calming influence. So while you're humidifying your house, you can also be adding some of those for calming, or some of the oregano for their antiviral components. So as I mentioned before, I will be, once this video is posted on the Channa Center's site, I will add some additional links for that. So I will add some direct links for the discussions I've had previously, touching on some of the specific nutrients. I will include Dr. Wells' anti-inflammatory pyramid because it really gives the idea of how we can manage that with our diet. And some of the other lifestyle recommendations that we've discussed as well today, so that you can tap into those. I do encourage you, if you have any questions or concerns, to comment in those, and those will be responded to. And as I mentioned, next Wednesday, I will be doing another discussion. We'll be a little more focused on acupressure tools, again, for both immune system and for stress management. I do encourage you, regardless of your ability to participate, to watch. I will also be providing some cards that will be attached to the video that you can use as a visual reference. Always good, whether it be just a friend or a partner or a caregiver, but it would be great to watch that with somebody so that you could try to start to implement some of the strategies at home. I hope you find that helpful. Look forward to chatting with you soon, and hope to see you all soon as well.